So this next section of resources focuses on consumers, um, and you'll see there's a variety of resources listed here. Now, I'm just going to focus in on Demographics Now and Policy Map. These are our two sort of resources that we pay for, and they have lots of really good information, but I've included some links to some government organizations down below, because sometimes the government actually does have like really good information, lots of like data. The census specifically has a lot of information, but we could access the census information through things like Demographics Now and Policy Map. So we'll be taking a quick look at those two resources. So this is Demographics Now, and it is a useful tool for finding, well, like the name implies, demographic information. It also can do things like generate lists of people and companies, and it can do maps and other things, but we're going to focus just on its sort of the demographic stuff that it does. So if I click on this demographics tab here across the top, it's going to drop me into where I can get demographics reports. Now, something that needs to be noted is that, this is a very sort of geography-based tool, in that it wants you to be looking for information about a specific geographical area or areas, and all that's within the United States. So this is not an international tool, it's just the United States. And up here is where I actually set that geography. So it's not down here where I'm going to be like choosing my reports and stuff. I do it up here in this box, their geo filter. So you see it's defaulting to the entire United States. I could do something like pick a geographic region. Maybe I just want the state of Michigan. And then you'll notice as I start typing, it should autocomplete. And so we have, Michigan, the state, or there's these various cities that sort of match that. And I can click on that, and now we're set to Michigan, and sort of any report that I create is going to be based just on that geography. I personally find it more useful, rather than just typing in my geography or geographic region here, I like to go to this options menu and choose this geography list. So this is just going to give me a bunch of predefined areas to choose from, as opposed to me just typing them in. So I'm going to get rid of the Michigan one. And then you see we have things like individual counties, the entire United States if I wanted. There's the individual states by zip code, by school district, all sorts of different ways to sort of break this down. One that I find particularly useful or interesting is the Metro CBSAs. So these are metro areas. I think CBSA stands for Core Based Statistical Area, I believe, and I think it actually dates back to television broadcasting or something. But these geographic regions are still very useful, because if I just typed in Detroit, for instance, in the filter and set it to Detroit, it would just limit me to the geography bound by the city limits of Detroit, which a lot of times when people say Detroit, they really mean like the more metro area of Detroit, right? So if I want to include all of those things, I can come here and choose that CBSA instead. So if I scroll through here, you'll see, I think if we get into the D's, alphabetical order, we should see one for Detroit. So Detroit, Warren, Dearborn. I think it's a little bit bigger than that, but so I can choose that one, and we can maybe choose a couple others. I also like this because it allows me to set more than one location. So if I'm trying to compare things or whatnot, so maybe El Paso, Texas, and Grand Junction, Colorado. Sure. So I have these three locations that I've selected. I'm just going to say done. So now those are my geographies, or geographical regions. And then when I'm in this demographics tab, the next thing to do is choose the type of report I want, and then the actual report itself. What data am I looking for? So when it comes to report types, you'll see that there's three different kinds. There's comparison, rank, and summary. They all work a little bit different. So a comparison report, what that will do is, based on the geography that I have selected, if it's more than one, it will generate a column in the report for each one of those geographical areas so that I can then compare them, hence comparison. Whereas a summary report will take each one of the geographical regions I've said, or I've picked, and it will combine them into just one area and give me a summary of those. So I hope that makes sense. And they're useful in different ways. Comparison, obviously, if I want to compare two different geographical regions, I can do so with the comparison. Summary might be, maybe I'm interested in the sort of tri-county area in southeastern Michigan, so I would combine Wayne, Macomb, and Oakland counties into one geographical area as opposed to comparing them. Rank reports are a whole different animal. What that does is it allows me to select, or what I need to do is I select several different geographical regions, and then I have to then select some dimension. Maybe that's population. Maybe that's how much they spend on hot dogs in a year. Some dimension, and then it will rank those geographical areas from most to least. And we'll take a look at a rank report later. For now, let's do a comparison report, and then when I click this drop down, here's where I can see all the different sort of reports that are available to me. And you'll notice there's a lot. There's going to be things related to demographics. There's going to be things related to consumer expenditures, so I can see how much money they're spending on different products and services. And what else? It's a lot of information that you would expect to find in like the census, those sort of things. But two that I would also draw your attention to that we're going to look at more in depth after this sort of basic report are the mosaic reports. So mosaic is a market segmentation sort of report that's produced by Experian. And so we'll look at those in a minute. And then also any of these Simmons ones. So any of these ones that are prefaced by Simmons, Simmons is a market research firm, and every year they send out something called the American Consumer Survey, I believe it's called. And they ask Americans a bunch of sort of yes, no binary type questions. What they ask them about things they buy, things they use, things they own, things they do, and then we can get access to their sort of responses or a form of their responses in these particular reports. And I draw attention to the Mosaic and the Simmons because that's actually proprietary information that Demographics now pays for, and then you get access through this. Whereas a lot of the other information, regarding consumer expenditures and demographics, are actually just coming from government sources. But let's pick one of these reports. Let's just do the complete demographic comparison, and we'll run a report. This one's fairly in depth, and I think you'll be familiar with the kinds of information it produces. But I choose that and I say run report, and then it generates the report here. Because we did a comparison report, we get a column for each one of our geographies, and then we can see we can then compare across. So total population for Detroit is 4.3 million, El Paso's 870,000, and Grand Junction's 150,000. If I just explore this, I'm going to find all sorts of other information. Sometimes you'll get sort of what the current or most current data is, and then they also might have a section where they do a forecast saying what it's expected to look like in 5 or 10 years. It just depends. Okay, so here in this one we're getting, the last full year they had would have been 2019, so they're doing a projection out to 2024, which would be 5 years. So I get all this same information, but with how it's projected to change. So that can be really useful too. But that's the basics of demographics now and how we can find a report. So in essence, it's just pick your geographies, choose what kind of chart, choose the actual data you want, and then run report. And once you have that report, you can view it here. And I should note there's also this download button where I can download that report as well. You can see the various forms here. I prefer spreadsheet just because that lets me do my own math with the data after the fact. Let's take a look at the Mosaic reports. So Mosaic is a market segmentation system, whatever, that was developed by Experian. If you're not familiar with Experian, they're one of the credit rating agencies. So essentially, they have tons of data on Americans or people living in America. They have your credit history, your credit score, your they know how much the home you live in is valued at. They know about your work. They have ideas. And they take all of that and then they use like predictive analysis to determine like whether or not you're receptive to particular types of marketing, like email or television or broadcast radio, all sorts of different things. Anyway, so they take the population of the United States and they clump it together into these bigger groups that they've created, and then they further subdivide those big groups into smaller segments, and we'll see those in just a second. So how do we get to them? So any of the reports here in the with that say Mosaic or start with Mosaic will get you to this data, and I think there's 4 of them available. I would just encourage you just to use 2 of them, only because their documentation on what these individual reports, how they differ, is a little bit shoddy to me. So the Mosaic comparison report is one that I would recommend. This one is it's looking more at just like it's doing it based on populations or just raw numbers of people. And then the household one is looking at in terms of households, or like the characteristics of the entire household that lives together. So comparison and household are the ones that I would recommend using, depending on what it is you want. The HH cluster, I believe that stands for household cluster, and I think this is more like neighborhoods as opposed to just households, so groups of households. And then the last one, the WP pop, I'm actually not sure at all based on their documentation what that one is. So again, I would just stick to the comparison report or the household comparison. So for this, let's just pick the household comparison report and see what it looks like. And we're still looking at these geographies of Detroit, El Paso, and what was the last one? Well, we'll see it in a second when the report finishes. Grand Junction. Yes, that's right. So here's what the report looks like, and it's not super meaningful if you don't know what these mean. But we see that they have a big group called the Power Elite, and these are the subgroups, and then we group B is Flourishing Families, and these are the subgroups, so on and so forth. And then this number is telling us how many households in that particular area fall into this category, and then a percentage of the households. So we see that like nearly 5% of households in the Detroit area fall into this American royalty category, whereas there's almost none there is none in these other 2. We see about 1,600 households in El Paso, or 0.6% of the population fall into this American prosperity. And we can, browse through and just look for, any that might stand out to us, like this one. Okay, so we see in El Paso, we have 67,000 households, or almost 25% of the population, fall into this balance and harmony group. Okay, so what does that mean, right? What are these? Well, if we click on them, it's going to bring up a little information sheet about that particular group. So we see the balance and harmony group is established families living lively lifestyles in city neighborhoods, and we get some information about them. Some of the features: they're bilingual households, they have roots abroad, they have a blue-collar income, married with kids, so on and so forth. You can see some other stuff about them, like about 80% of them are homeowners. Many of them have children, and their children are between the ages of 13 and 18, so on and so forth. And then this channel preference is actually quite neat. We can see the channels, so marketing, advertising channels are television, mail, broadcast radio. This is text or SMS advertising, email, and then social media is the last one there. And then that number is actually an index score. So we're going to see these when we look at the Simmons reports too, and you'll see these in just different marketing things. But essentially, how it works, at least for these, is a score of 100 means that equals the national average. So a score above 100 means that much more than the national average, and a score below 100 means that much below sort of the national average. So you really try to find things that stand out. And, so if we look at this one in particular, we see that under channel preference, we have this big score of 247 for broadcast radio. So radio would be a good channel to reach out to this particular population. At 247, that's more than twice. It's almost 2.5 times what the national average is, right? As opposed to down here, email is a score of 12. So virtually this would be the worst way to reach out to that. So I hope that makes sense. So you're looking, for scores that are significantly higher, significantly lower. I've heard from some marketing people that they don't care about these scores unless they're like 30 or more above or 30 or more below. So just something to keep in mind. And then they have this technology adoption area. They're on the high end of technology adoption. They consider them wizards. And we get some more interesting highlights here, so we can see things about their education or income or whatnot. Essentially, the middle of each one of these bar charts is the national average. So if it's on the right of it, then they're that much higher than the national average, and if it's on the left of it, then they're below the national average. This is a quick sheet to explain that particular those charts to you, so it makes more sense. And then the last thing you get is like this nice little sort of narrative description of the family. So balance and harmony lead relatively active, family-centered lifestyles, playing team sports like soccer and baseball. The adults in these city neighborhoods like the nearby nightlife and go to see movies and dance performances, so on and so forth. I feel like I've said so on and so forth an awful lot, so maybe I'll just stop. But anyway, so for each one of those categories or subcategories, we get one of these nice little information sheets, so we can click on that and see. Some things to keep in mind. So it's nice that we can see those, but sometimes this isn't like the best way to view these reports, I guess. So what I would encourage you to do is over here on the right-hand side, you can click. There's like this hamburger menu. That's what those three lines are referred to as a hamburger menu. And that's where they hide the help information. And if I go to the help information, you'll see it's got more than just the mosaic stuff. It's got information on a lot of the different reports that are available. But if we go to the mosaic one down here, this mosaic details, one, if you want to learn more about it, there's this Mosaic USA about Mosaic that you can read to understand more about the reports. But also this grand index is really quite interesting. And what it is, I'm not going to download it here, but it's a spreadsheet. It's a giant spreadsheet of all of the data in the Mosaic that the Mosaic reports use. So it talks a lot about like where they get that data, but it would allow you to like sort of quickly facet. Like to hone in on a particular category. Maybe you're just interested in finding which of these groups are, very receptive to social media marketing or something like that. The grand index is something that could allow you to find that very quickly, because you could just find the column that has that social media receptiveness and then look for the highest scores or sort it to the highest scores. So maybe it's a bit advanced, but that's one of my preferred tools is like this grand index. I think it's very useful. So that's the Mosaic reports, kind of in short. And here's our links to all the descriptions for the different Mosaic groups, too, if you just wanted to kind of go through and see them all. And again, that's hidden in this help section that's accessible in the upper right-hand side of the website. Another useful report that you can find, or set of reports that you can find in Demographics Now, are the Simmons reports. So if we look at the report names, it's any of these ones that start with Simmons. So this all comes from Simmons is a market research firm. Every year they do a survey called the American, I think it's the American Consumer Survey is what it's called. But I mentioned this earlier, but it's essentially just a bunch of yes/no questions that ask people things about stuff they buy, stuff they own, things they do. So you can find out, like, do you own a snowblower? Are you a vegetarian? Do you consider yourself fashionable? All sorts of questions like that, and we can see sort of those responses here. So and it's split into a bunch of different categories. So we can see automotive, beverages. So a lot of this is just going to be exploring to see what kind of stuff is available. But let's do I don't know, computers and internet sounds fun. We'll run that report, give it a second to load. Still working with the same 3 geographical areas. I think for most of them, they have this little populations or demographic information at the top, but then what we want to do is get into these ones here, so we can see. And you kind of have to interpret these. I don't think they have a guide to all of these particular questions. You may be able to search it up on the internet and find the actual question, but for most of them, you can kind of interpret it this. So I can see. So computer peripherals, accessories. Does anyone in the household, household, own a microphone? And then we can see for Detroit it's 96, El Paso is 68, and Grand Junction's 96. What does that mean? Is it just 96 households? No. This isn't a case of these are index scores. So if you watched the bit about mosaic reports and the index scores there, this is very similar, if not, well, basically the same. So a score of 100 means about the national average, and anything above 100 means more likely than the national average, and anything below 100 means less likely than the national average. So you really try to find things that are significantly above 100 or significantly below. That 30-ish points above or below seems to be a pretty good threshold. So if we look here at El Paso, 68. So that's pretty below, meaning, so if I were manufacturing microphones for computers, maybe El Paso is not an area I would want to try to sell those, because they have they're far below the national average in terms of having those, or maybe that becomes my target. Maybe I feel like they could need them because they don't. Not a lot of people own them. I don't know. However you want to interpret it is up to you. Maybe find some other data to back up your conclusions and whatnot. Let's see if anything else just jumps out at us in terms of numbers here really quick. Okay, so we have this one down here, software, business software. So doing accounts payable and payroll, we have very low again for El Paso. All right, so that's like the computer one. If we take a look at maybe another one I always like to show is called the lifestyle demographic statements, because this is sort of where all the other ones sort of make sense, like lawn and garden, pets, so and whatnot. The lifestyle demographic statement is sort of like a potpourri of possible things, and you just kind of got to browse through it to see all the weird questions that they ask, or maybe they're not weird, but different questions that they ask. So we'll see, like, oh wow, is anyone in the household expecting a baby? Recycling. So if I was maybe interested in finding populations that are interested in green products or environmentally friendly products, I could look to this recycling one as maybe an indication. So I see, recycling plastic bags, right around the national average. It looks like about all of these are right around the national average. But there's more stuff, so you can see like does their budget allow them to buy designer clothing? They always look for their favorite brands. And if we go further down, find out things that are important to them, job security, more important to do their duty than enjoy life. Wow, that does describe a lot of people in the Detroit area, it looks like. Maybe that's sad. I am a under attitudes here. Sorry, I'm using my trackpad. It's not always most reliable, but I'm a vegetarian. Looks like a decent amount of people you're more likely to be a vegetarian if you live in the El Paso area compared to the other two areas. So hopefully this is giving you just an idea of what you can find. Like I said, there's just a lot of different stuff contained in those reports, and I think a good thing to do is just spend some time browsing them to see what kind of information you can find, because it's hard to find this kind of information in other resources. It's a lot of times just doing a Google search isn't necessarily going to turn this kind of information up. This is, it's proprietary, and Demographics now had to buy it from Simmons so that we could all have access to it. Let's take a look at sort of the last kind of report I want to talk about, and that is the ranking reports. So we're still, in with Detroit, El Paso, and Grand Junction. under report type, I'm just going to pick that rank one. That's the one we haven't looked at yet. And then you'll notice that the types of reports that show up here under report name actually change quite. Like it's not the same reports that are available to us under comparison and summary. And we can choose any one of these. These are sort of the default ways that it ranks things. So maybe I'll choose the income report, and what it's going to do. And I'll be honest, this is not my favorite way to use this kind of report. I don't use the pre-made ones at all generally, but I want you to see it. So here, it just takes that household income dimension and it ranks the different geographical locations by that. So we see the Detroit is number one for household income, followed by Grand Junction, followed by El Paso. Just rank those three. Okay. I think the better way to use a rank report is to find just one dimension and sort of rank a bunch of geographical areas on that. And you can do that through the advanced feature. So we're in this basic tab, but if we go to advanced, we can choose a type of report here. So, choose a rank report. And then, actually, let's expand. Because right now we only have 3 sort of geographical regions. Let's go back into that geography list that we had. I'm going to go back to our Metro CBSAs, and I'm just going to choose a bunch. So just at random, just to kind of add some more areas. So what do we got there? We got about 7. Let's go like 8, 9, 10. All right, so I picked about 10 different locations, and I'm going to choose a rank report, and I'm going to choose, so I need to pick a variable, and this has got some, if you come here, this is probably going to be blank. This has some saved information from the last time I did a report. Instead, what I want to do is go down to this second section where it says select variables, and this is where I can choose some variables. And this is the list that should appear by default, is this top list. And you kind of drill down through it and find things. So let's maybe do one on, let's do consumer expenditure. And then we can choose, do we want the current year or projections? Sure, let's just do projections. I'm going to eliminate that health insurance one. We don't want that. So then let's look at, so then we can break it down in terms of average or versus total. This can be an important distinction. If I'm looking at a relatively small geographical area versus a relatively large one, like in terms of population, if I did total expenditure, I would just expect the one with more people to be higher, whereas average, I can get a better idea of how it compares across different geographies based on size. So let's stick with average, and then we need to pick a category. You can see there's a number of different categories here. I'll just do alcoholic beverages, why not? Let's do alcoholic beverages at home and beer and ale at home. So we're going to rank these geographies by the amount of money that they spend on beer and ale at home. And then you give the report a title. It won't always have a title there, so I'm just going to call it beer, and I'm going to say run report. And then hopefully what we'll get is a list of all those different geographies broken down by who spends the most on beer. And in this case, we see that in the above average category, we have Des Moines, Amarillo, however they want to say it, Dubuque, Detroit, and whatnot. And yes, all ranked by what they spend on beer. So that's how a rank report works. Sometimes they're quite useful. I think you'll probably get more usage out of the comparison and summary reports, but this is what a rank report looks like. And maybe it'll be useful for you. Who knows? This is Policy Map. A lot like demographics now, it essentially allows us to look up lots of data about people in the United States, demographics and otherwise. So you can come here and get population data, spending data, a lot of that free government source data. It's just the way that you get to the data is different. You use this really the intention is to have you use this map to sort of explore things. And they have all these different categories here across the top in this gray bar, and then you can essentially pick, some facet or, value from those categories, and then it will like make a heat map for you. So let's take a look at maybe education. Let's see if we can quickly map out where, okay, so yeah, college. So anyway, so I could click on education, and you'll see, there's all these possible categories. Inside those categories, there's lots of subcategories, and that's going to be the same for like most of these categories. Like if I jump over to income and spending, you see it's the same thing. There's all these possible different categories and sort of subcategories within those. So a lot of using this site, like using all the other sites I've talked about, is just kind of exploring and getting to know what's in here. But I'm going to go back to the education one. Let's see if we can find, let's go to college graduates by major. Let's find where the highest concentration of business students live, or business graduates, so people with business degrees. So I'm going to choose that, and then it's going to reload the map, and it's going to make this like heat map, right? So one of the things about Policy Map is it will sort of, it colors in the map by geographical region based on the zoom level that we're at. So because we're at this level, if we take a look, once we've added that, what they call data layer, it's giving us some information about it over here. So the first thing we can see is that this data is coming from 2014 to 2018. The value that they're using is percentage, and the shaded areas, it's doing it by county. And if I wanted to, I could click this and I could change. You could see what's available. So I could do it by city, I could do it by congressional district, metropolitan division, by state, so on, so forth. And then this is telling us sort of the values. We see that dark purple color is a value of 22.08% or more. All of this stuff is changeable by you. So we could, for colors, if I don't like the purple, maybe I'll change it to a blue. Now we have a turquoisey blue, and then we can even change the values if we wanted to draw. If we wanted to change up how it's being broken down. But also, like I was saying, we can zoom, and we can kind of like pan around. So if we were to click on this map and move, like drag it, you'll see we can just sort of pan the map. If we use our mouse wheel, we can zoom in and out. I'm on my trackpad, so I don't want to do that necessarily, but if I go over to the zoom levels here and zoom in a couple times, let's see, keep zooming. There we go. So now it's switched. I've zoomed in so close now, and I'm Kansas, I guess, here, that it actually changed from county to zip code. And sort of the same thing will happen if we zoom out a number eventually. So now we're so zoomed out, it changed to state. This is kind of a useful feature, right? So right away I can see, that's interesting, Nebraska. I wonder why that is. But Nebraska, Nevada, Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, all these darker blue states have higher concentrations. So maybe, Texas is one we're interested in. So I'm going to zoom in to that a bit more. You can pan over there. And we see, Texas by counties. Maybe zoom in one more time. Still at county level, that's good. And then I can click on any one of these, so like around Houston, and it's going to bring up information about that particular county. So this is a really useful tool, like if it has the information you're looking for, to like kind of quickly zero in on the geography where there's high concentrations of whatever it is you may be looking for. And again, there's lots of different categories. We can look under things like health. You can look up particular like things about alcohol use, tobacco use. We can look up particular diseases, chronic conditions, things like that. If we switch to something like lending, now we can see, prime. I think they have like prime mortgages and subprime mortgages and all sorts of different options to filter through. But hopefully this is enough to get you started so that you can kind of get a feel for how it works. Essentially, it's, pick some dimension and then play around with the map. It works a lot like Google Maps. So if you have experience with that, I think you'll be able to easily navigate this. And then the last thing I noticed is they do have up here at the top, they're rolling out a new interface. So this is their older interface. They do have a new interface. I have not played with the new interface enough to that I didn't want to demonstrate it because I just haven't played with it enough. I've used the older interface, but just from what I have used it, it works very similar. It's just sort of a more modern look to it. So feel free to give that a try too. Just a heads up that it's there. So.